This is going to be another one of those videos where I literally can't pronounce anyone's name. Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about books. And today, seeing as it's the end of May, I'm going to talk about my TBR for June. So I had my birthday on Monday and that was actually really nice. I had quite a few people drop by to chat, you know, at the door, and for most of them I was still in my pajamas and hadn't even brushed my hair, so it was a little bit embarrassing, but it was really nice that people were thinking of me. And my parents gave me money for books and my brother bought me a Waterstones gift voucher, so I am like a pig in shit right now. I am so excited about all the new books that are going to be winging their way to me. I've ordered the books with my birthday money from my parents, but a little part of me wants to keep the Waterstones voucher and wait until the shops reopen and actually just have some lovely time to myself browsing in the store. So I think that's what I'm going to do with that. Other than that, I've had a bit of a tough week with the kids. Their behaviour hasn't been great, and in my wisdom I decided to throw potty training into the mix, so no wonder I'm feeling a bit... They've gone to their dad's, and I've got a few days to myself, which, you know, as horrible as divorce and the end of the family unit is, those days to myself are worth their weight in gold. Obviously I'm still finding out who I am as a single mother, and well, as a single mother and a single woman, but I can appreciate the good things that are coming out of this horrible situation. But then days like I have with the kids, particularly Tuesday, oh my god, I just wanted to sell them both. And so yesterday I sat down, I made a plan for today. I was going to make the most of my time. I was going to get up this morning, I was going to go for a long walk, I was going to do all these things, and then my alarm went off and I just slept straight through it. But I have at least achieved a bit of housework. I've obviously got myself together enough to make this video, and I've done a bit of reading today. So without further ado, let's jump to the TBR. So I had a slightly mad moment on NetGalley where I requested quite a lot of books, not thinking that I would get approved to review them all, and I got approved for all of them. So I have quite an extensive NetGalley TBR as well as my regular TBR to keep on top of the reading challenges that I do each year. So I'll split my TBR into two because the reading challenge ones absolutely have to be done this month, but I really want to make some good headway with the NetGalley titles I've got. So I'll talk about my challenge reads first. So first up is a book I'm going to start today, which is a bit sneaky seeing as we're still in May, but it's called The Broken Circle and it's by, I'm going to have to read this and I really hope I don't butcher it, Enjeela Ahmadi-Miller. Oh, that wasn't so difficult. Enjeela Ahmadi-Miller. This is a memoir. It's set in Afghanistan in the early 80s, prior, I think, to the Civil War and definitely prior to the Soviet invasion of the country, and looks at Enjeela's childhood. Her mother was sick and, seeing the unrest in the country, decided to go for medical treatment in India, leaving Enjeela and her siblings with their father. And this book tracks their journey out of Afghanistan to be reunited with her mother, and I think it spans, or at least their escape spans, about 5 years. I'm really interested in Afghanistan. Obviously, like many people in my generation, what we heard of Afghanistan was, you know, quite a heavily Muslim country where women are treated a little bit like second-class citizens, and there is a lot of religious violence and control of the population. What I hadn't known about Afghanistan is that it hadn't always been like that. In the 70s, it was quite a modern, forward-thinking country. People had a lot more freedoms and rights, and over the years I've read quite a few books set in the country. So I think probably the first I read was The Bookseller of Kabul. Then I read Khalid Hosseini's books, The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns, and I think it's obviously very sad but fascinating how the country has changed and become what it is and where it will go in the future. What I haven't read yet is a memoir by someone who actually lived in the situation as it was happening. So this is one that I'm really looking forward to. Next is The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai, I think is how you pronounce her name. This is going to be another one of those videos where I literally can't pronounce anyone's name. So this seems to have two timelines going on. The first is Chicago in the mid-80s during the AIDS outbreak, and the second is modern day. Yale Tishman is a art curator and owns an art gallery or runs an art gallery, and as the AIDS epidemic increases, a lot of the people around him become victims to that, and he ends up left really with just the sister of one of his friends who has passed away with AIDS. And in the modern timeline is the story of that sister, a woman called Fiona, who is estranged from her daughter, who has somehow ended up in a cult, and she's found herself in Paris trying to track down her daughter. And both these timelines kind of interweave and paint a picture of what it was like to live during that epidemic, and also how it's impacted the lives of those involved. I've heard nothing but good things about this book, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. AIDS and HIV isn't something that has really ever touched my life, but I think we can all be aware of the stigma that has endured ever since, particularly for gay men, and so I think this book's going to be fascinating. Next, we are finally leaving my Kindle and moving on to a book I actually have on my shelf. Still not picked the stickers off of this one, but it is The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. I think there are better covers out there than that one. So this is about a man who was adopted to an Irish family who've never really made him feel like part of that family, and the story is basically a story of him finding himself and rediscovering who he is. This is another one that I've heard loads about, all good things. I think it's going to be quite an emotional read, but I'm okay with that. And so yeah, another one that I'm definitely really excited to get to. My next pick is quite a nerdy book, I think. I actually think it's an academic book, and it is Scottish women's fiction 1920s to 1960s. It's by Carol Anderson and Aileen Christianson, who I think are both academics. I don't even know how I came to have this book. I think it was through my uncle, who for a wee while had a sideline in selling academic books, and I've always kept hold of it, meaning to read it, because I do want to, you know, expand my knowledge and experience of Scottish female writers. So I think this could be quite interesting. I'm worried it'll be a little bit dry, but I'm hoping it'll give me a kind of jumping off point. I know it mentions Muriel Spark on the cover, and I've read The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, so you know, at least there's a little comfort zone there, and we'll just see where it takes me. The next book on my list I was going to get from the library. Now, I did get an email today from my library service saying that here in Scotland, libraries and other kind of leisure things are part of, I think it's going to be phase 3 of our reopening after coming out of lockdown. So I'm not sure if the library will be open at that point, so it might not get read this month. But it is Jeanette Winterson's Frankissstein. I mean, it sounds batshit crazy, okay? There's no way around this. So there's a transgender doctor who's working with this Victor Stein, who's like a leading AI, and then on the other side there's like this divorced guy who's moved back in with his mum but is about to make his fortune selling sex robots, and then there's cryogenics thrown into the mix. It all just sounds a bit bizarre, but it is basically a Frankenstein retelling. I read Frankenstein last year. I thought it was really, I'm not sure I loved it, but I did like the questions it threw up about humanity, who is really the monster. And I've read Jeanette Winterson as well. I've read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, and I've read Why Be Happy When You Can Be Normal, which is her memoir. So as weird as this story is, it feels like it's in good hands, but then kind of at the back of my head I've got a bit of trepidation, because I really enjoy a lot of Margaret Atwood's books, but I read The Heart Goes Last, and I really didn't enjoy that, and that had sex robots in it, and it was just so stupid. So I'm probably conflating the two in my head, but I am a little bit dubious about this one. And then finally, for my June TBR, in terms of the books that I want to read from my reading challenges, is Normal People by Sally Rooney. Yes, I'm very behind the curve. I have not read this yet. I haven't watched the adaptation, and I won't be watching the adaptation until I've read the book. This one sounds like it's right up my street. There are two teenagers who don't really have anything to do with each other at school. Connell's mother is Marianne's family's housekeeper, but they're both at school together and they end up at the same uni. And they have that kind of connection, I gather, but it's not anything set in stone. Marianne seems to go off the rails a bit. Connell struggles to fit in, and it sounds like it's a book about first love, family and friendships, and it sounds really interesting to me. People have been loving the adaptation. I haven't heard anything bad said about it, but what's worrying me is one of my best friends, and he's my best bookish friend, and he's recommended so many good books to me over the years. He read this and he hated it so much he didn't finish it, and if I ever mention the book to him, he just slags it off completely. So I don't know if I'm going to find it a little bit try hard, a little bit worthy, I don't know, but I'm going to keep open-minded about it because the premise just sounds totally my thing. And then we get on to my NetGalley Avalanche, which I'm so thankful. So I suppose I should start this because not everyone who watches books about videos is necessarily a booktuber, and so you might not know what NetGalley is. NetGalley is a website that you can sign up to and request to read galleys, which is pre-release copies of books for free in return for a review. Obviously not every book that gets released is going to be on NetGalley, and you won't always get accepted for every book you request. I've read some incredible books through NetGalley that I'm really, really thankful for, but maybe that's a different topic for another video, I suppose. But what I've done with my backlog is I've sorted them by publication date, which I know is a bit shaky at the moment during COVID because I think publication dates are getting changed, but I'm just going by the publication date that's on NetGalley. I've sorted them by publication date and I'm going to work through them that way. So at the moment I've got ones that, well, one was actually released this week, and books kind of up to the middle of July that I'm going to try and get through in June. So the one I've started is called Progress Over Perfection, and it's by Emma Norris. It's a bit of a self-help book. Just the title alone spoke to me. I keep always having to remind myself of that. I wouldn't say I am a perfectionist, but I get really stressed if I can't do something properly. I'm always second guessing my abilities, I'm always second guessing the quality of my work, and so I thought this might be a little bit useful, seeing as I am having quite a tough time with my mental health, and that aspect of my personality probably isn't helping. I'm about, I don't know, like 40% through it just now. Nothing has come out of it that has changed my life, but it is a gorgeous book, and I will hopefully finish that in the next couple of days. The next one is a book of poetry. Now, I don't think I've read a book of poetry in my life, certainly not as an adult. I think probably the last book of poetry that I remember reading was at school, and it was Heard in the Playground by Jeanette and Alan Alberg, which I loved, but yeah, poetry in general just isn't something that has spoken to me. But the title of this one grabbed me. It's Fat Girl Finishing School, and it's by a poet called Rachel Wiley, who obviously I don't know who that is. I've never heard of her before, but this seems to be a collection of poems on the fat body experience, misogyny, feminism, and I just thought, struggling in the fat body experience myself, and people always talk about poetry. I always get that kind of FOMO thing, so this is probably a good way to dip my toe in and see if poetry does anything for me. Next is Breaking and Mending, and this is a memoir by a junior doctor called Joanna. This book talks about the realities of being a junior doctor and, struggling with overwhelm and things like that, and I just thought it might be quite a good book to read at this time, or any time really. I do think they're people that should be valued, not just when we're in a pandemic, so I'm looking forward to this one. But the next one I am so excited about is The Sea Wife by Amity, Gage. I heard about it on a podcast last year and it sounds really, really interesting, so I'm chuffed to bits that I got the NetGalley. So this is the story of a husband and wife told through the eyes of Juliet, the wife, and the husband has bought a boat and they take their two children to just go on a big sailing adventure. None of them are sailors. The children are 2 and 7. Juliet is struggling with, I think, work pressures. She has postnatal depression. I don't think the marriage is great, but this adventure seems to rejuvenate them all until tragedy strikes. And it's told in quite an interesting sounding way as well. So there's first person narrative from Juliet after the event, but also her husband's captain's logs from the boat while they were travelling. So I think there's so much going for this book. If I don't like it, I'll be incredibly disappointed. Then I have a book called Mostly Dead Things by Kirsten Arnott. This is a book about a family picking themselves back up after their father has committed suicide. It's based around his taxidermy business, which Jessa Lynn takes over and tries to keep running while her mother is falling apart. Her brother's wife has disappeared. It just sounded like quite an interesting family drama, and I love those, so on my list it went. And finally, and you know, I'm not even sure I'm going to get to all of these in June, I'm aware this is a huge TBR, but is a book called Across the Water by Ingrid Alexandra. It's about a woman who lives quite an isolated life, but across the creek she can see 3 other houses and she spends her time watching them. One of the people who lives in those houses is a woman with a young baby, and she disappears. The last time she was seen was down at the creek. There are rumours that, you know, she was a reluctant mother, she wasn't coping very well, and a lot of people put it down as a murder-suicide. But Liz, Our Lady in Isolation, thinks there's more to it. This kind of sounds like it might fall into a bit of a Girl on the Train alike, which I think we're kind of over, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. So I make that 12 books, which is probably a bit ambitious, but we'll see how many I get through. So what are you going to read in June? Do we have any books in common? Have you read any of the books that I've mentioned? Do you use NetGalley? Tell me all about your life. I am a nosy bitch. If you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And I put up new bookish content every Saturday, so if you don't want to miss my next video, please subscribe. But until next time, it mentions